context of what John has said, that are going to become critical over the next 18 months. We need to consider our role in both as individuals within trade unions or individuals or in NGOs, or whatever role we play. I've just come from Heathrow, not by plane, it's because we're demonstrating outside the detention centres at Heathrow. It's my constituency. There are 1,000 people locked up in those detention centres who've committed no crime. It's interesting, they argue that Heathrow is full up, no capacity, but they have the capacity to deport people on a daily basis, illegally in many instances. The two issues I want to focus on that will become critical over the next 18 months is aviation expansion and rail nationalisation. And let me do rail nationalisation first. Exactly as John said, as every opinion poll shows now, that there's majority support in favour of renationalisation. I thought the most interesting one recently was 85% of UKIP supporters in favour of renationalisation of rail, which is interesting in the way the UKIP individual supporter is lining up on some of these policy issues. Where it's at at the moment is that the franchises are now coming for renewal. The East Coast Line franchise, it's been brought, as you know, into public control and management at the moment, and the Tories are trying to push that out to be refranchised by the end of the year, certainly trying to do it before the next election. But interestingly enough, every other franchise then comes up for renewal, for rebidding in the lifetime of the next government. So 4 weeks ago, we had a meeting of the trade union group of MPs in Parliament, which is the group chaired by Ian Lavery, who's superb, and it's the trade union group serviced by the TUC. And we brought together the rail unions and a group of academics, and they did a presentation, a detailed paper presentation to Labour MPs on the way in which rail can be renationalised without any cost. And also looked at and gave us that timetable of the franchises, each one of them coming up for renewal under the next government period. But then also looked at the opportunities there were on the different modes of management of a new system, ownership and control. And obviously the RMT proposal that I think is now gaining significant support across the other unions around a system that's managed by a combination of passengers, workers themselves, with democratic representation as well, was the one in which many of the academics were arguing actually this could be the ideal model and was probably tested as the most popular as well. Now where that's got to, and that's why I want to drill down into these issues now about what concrete actions we need to take this coming period, where that's got to is that, having done that presentation to a significant number of Labour MPs, there's a sort of a groundswell of support building up. So let's try and get that committed within the Labour manifesto. And some of you may have seen a few weeks ago there was a letter, got some publicity by a whole range of Labour candidates signing up to that as well. In addition to that, we have in Parliament Caroline Lucas and the Green Party committed to renationalisation as well, and looking at the similar sort of models of democratic ownership and control. So there we have the policy, so if you like the theme, it's as a straightforward marketing terms, the theme. What we need now is the scheme, in other words, how do we promote that and how do we sell it more widely. I don't think it needs an awful lot of selling amongst the general public. Where it does need selling is amongst the Labour and trade union movement to give people confidence actually that, one, it will secure them votes, that's the first thing to assist them in getting elected, but then secondly, it will also ensure that it's a keynote policy in the run-up to the general election that they can go out there and campaign on and have confidence about. Where are we at? Well, the neoliberal faction within the Labour Party, around Ed Balls and others, are refusing to allow any frontbench spokesperson to give any commitment with regard to anything around expenditure. And even when the new child support agency proposal was put forward, some of us argued against it and voted against it, even foregone expenditure, which is a bizarre way of looking at how you plan the next government's funding. However, I think at the moment, the momentum has built majority support, certainly from the Labour Party, and not all other groups, obviously, to the left of the Labour Party as well, and majority support amongst trade unions and the TUC, and majority support in the general public. So I think there's almost now, not an inevitability, but there's such a momentum, we could see by the autumn a commitment given to some form of process by which rail is brought back into public ownership. Ed Miliband's people, as far as I'm aware so far, are only committing themselves or willing to consider allowing the public sector to bid. Now, well, I know that sounds timid, but to be honest, that's a near bleeding miracle from what it was over the last 17 years, when there was a refusal. If some of you remember, we campaigned just to keep one of the lines that went bankrupt in public ownership, so we could use it as a benchmark and demonstrate how the public sector worked. But at least that's an advance. But I think we're on the tipping point of pushing them now towards the process of bringing it all back into public ownership. So I think this next 6 to 9 months before the shutters are put down on the construction of Labour's manifesto is absolutely key. And the momentum needs to be maintained, both at every trade union conference. Those ones that are associated with rail obviously are committed. The others, in looking at more wider social issues, are addressing this issue as well, building it up to the TUC, forcing it onto the Labour Party agenda. But the fight isn't obviously just within the Labour Party, because the Labour Party leadership will only follow if it is electorally popular. So therefore the campaign is as important outside of the Labour Party, in fact more important outside of the Labour Party than it is within the party itself. And I think that building up a momentum in any way we possibly can, creatively putting this issue on the agenda, giving confidence to what is a timid Labour Party leadership that this could be popular, electorally popular, and therefore the ability then for those on the progressive element of the Labour front bench to face down the neoliberals, I think gives us a real opportunity. And I'm usually a pessimist on these things. This isn't wild optimism, this is an element of actually looking at as objective as I can of where we are strategically in this campaign and renationalisation. That's on rail. With regard to the other issue then is, without Siamese twins on this one now for years, most of our list, this is like your life passing in front of you again, is on expansion at Heathrow and the third runway in my constituency again. What the major parties have done is they've done a deal not to close down any discussion about expansion of aviation in London and the South East before the general election, set up the Howard Davis Commission under the Tories, with the support of Labour and the Lib Dems. Davis Commission not to report until after the general election. We met Howard Davis and I said, well, you can report soon, can't you? So I can do it by January. From January I'm going off for 4 months. Why is that? Well, they've told him to. And then he fuffed and said, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Actually, it'll be a much better document if we give it longer. It is a deal to avoid any dispute between the main parties on the expansion of Heathrow in particular before the general election. Again, what we're campaigning for, and we're working on a cross-party basis with a whole range of Conservative, Lib Dems and others, to say at least the minimum demand should be for the parties to be honest and actually give their policies before the general election so people can make their judgment before the general election. Because I think we need to expose just how much the main political parties now have been captured again by the aviation lobby. We forced them back with one of the most significant environmental campaigns in the history of this country to defeat them over the third runway last time round. The combination of those local campaigners, combined with Climate Camp coming to my constituency, combined with what John and Haycan had been doing for years, created what was almost a NIMBYist campaign, to be frank, at the beginning, into something that had much wider significance, in fact global significance. So it wasn't just about save our home, save our community. Of course it was important, but people were educated about the impact of aviation on global warming as well. And those little old ladies in their blue rinses sitting on the straw bales at Climate Camp was a wonder to behold. We all learnt a lot as a result of that. So defeating them at that stage was absolutely significant. But they've come back again, as we knew they would. They've come back again, and to defeat them this time round, I think would be much more significant. It would send a message of confidence to everyone campaigning on environmental issues, but certainly confidence across the globe in campaigning against the expansion of aviation and the impact it has on climate change. How do we do that? Well, we mobilise the local communities as we are doing, of course. We continue with that. And creatively, we're looking at different ideas which have got to lift people's spirits. And remember, in my area, the airport itself has bought up a lot of the homes as well. But what's interesting, the people that they've rented those homes out to are now saying, well, hang on, you're renting us our home now, you might own it, but it's still our home, it's still our community. Our children still go to the local school that you're going to demolish as well. So we're incorporating as many of them into the campaign as possible. But it needs, again, it needs us all now to be actually be arguing within our own organisations that this has become a critical issue again. We are faced with the argument all over again about, this is about jobs versus environment. No, it isn't. This is about actually protecting the globe in the long term to make sure that we tackle climate change. But in addition to that, we've demonstrated time and time again with Green New Deal, we can provide jobs through alternative energy sources, etc. We can create the jobs and make them sustainable rather than create jobs that actually are unsustainable in the long run, because actually every time they've expanded Heathrow, they've reduced the number of jobs with new technology, not increased them. But in addition to that, we can ensure that we combine a strategic planning of aviation, which is sustainable, with strategic planning of employment at the same time. And that creativity that we had in the last campaign, we need to revive, but we need to do it again. The timescale for this is this next 12 months between now and the general election, because I think this is going to be a key issue that we have to put back on the agenda that all the political parties will be seeking not even to discuss.